Thank you, Amanda. And good morning, everybody. So nice to see you. I didn't know how many people would show up on Labor Day weekend, the last big summer weekend. I can't even believe it's already Labor Day weekend. Um, Welcome to Dharma Sunday. I'm just curious to know if there's anyone who is showing up here at Dharma Sunday for the first time. Welcome. Welcome, Sandy. Welcome, Lars. Um, Welcome, Christina. Just those of you whose names I'm seeing. Yeah, welcome so much. It's so wonderful to have you come and join us. Um, I asked Amanda not to read my bio because I thought it was just by this point, like, it seemed like we didn't need to go through that. But just for you guys who just showed up, I'm one of the co-spiritual directors of Natural Dharma Fellowship with Lama Willa Baker, and and a teacher with Natural Dharma Fellowship. So it's so nice to meet you and so nice to have you here. Um, so our Dharma Sunday format is we usually start with some meditation practice, and we'll be doing that again today, probably meditating for somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. It'll be a guided meditation, lightly guided, not a whole lot of guiding. And then we'll take a little break, a 15-minute break, and come back, and then I'll open things up for us to have some conversation together, and I'll share some things um, this morning. And I just got back into the country after a month away yesterday, and I seem to have come back with a bit of a head cold. So during the meditation, I may be turning off my volume just so you don't have to listen to me blow my nose and sneeze. But then I'll come back on again for the instructions. Um, Anyone here who has never meditated before? If you're brave enough to let us know that, that will help me a little bit if I'm in the guided meditation, if I know that um, nobody, okay, I don't see anybody. So that sounds good. And Amanda, are we able to use some of the prayers? I'd love to just start with taking refuge together, and then I'll go into the meditation. Can we do that? Yes. Okay, great. So we're going to take refuge together. And for those of you who are not particularly familiar with this practice, it's a way of it's very, I mean, one of the most prevalent and common of the Buddhist practices. And it's what it is actually is a supplication. It's a way of using prayer and the energy of prayer to awaken within us a space of ease and peace and interconnectedness. And there's a kind of a formulaic way of going about doing that, but the underlying intention with taking refuge is to remind ourselves that we are our own source, deepest source of refuge, actually, that our awakened heart, our true nature, is a place of deep ease and peace where we can go whenever we need to feel rejuvenated, resourced, when we need a place of ease and relaxation. And the way the formula works is that we take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And it's kind of like a secret language for describing how we get access back to who we really are. So when we take refuge in the Buddha, we're taking refuge in that deepest awakened part of who we are, which is our deepest, our guru. That part of us is our teacher. It's calling us home. It's inviting us back to our own awakening. And as a symbol of somebody who did that before, as an example, then we use the Buddha, because the Buddha was somebody who was able to take that journey back into remembering who he really was, and then to bring the teachings forward to help others to be able to do that. So we take refuge in the Buddha both as an example and an inspiration, and as a kind of energetic symbol for our own awakened heart and our own true nature. And then we take refuge in the Dharma, and I'm going to say more about Dharma when we come to the next part of our morning, but Dharma here, as in this case, as the teachings that the Buddha gave that open a path that we can actually follow to return to who we really are. And then we take refuge in the Sangha, which is the community of others who are engaged in these same return journeys to our essence. And, because there are a lot of people who either don't know about this or really don't care about it. And so to find communities of others where the goal is to do the necessary work of purification and release and opening and training to come back to who we really are is a very precious and beautiful situation. So we take refuge in this, for this morning, it's in our little group here, but it could also be in your larger extended community of everything that supports you on your journey. So that's just a tiny little commentary on this practice, and I'll do my best to manage to sing the Tibetan, but we do start with the Tibetan because there's something about turning to the language in which the Dharma was originally taught, although actually Tibetan isn't quite the original language, but the Tibetan language was developed specifically as a way to communicate the Buddhist teachings. Before Buddhism came into Tibet, there was no written language. And so the written language was developed as a way to carry and communicate the teachings. So even if you don't necessarily you don't understand what it's saying, and then we'll chant the translation after that. Okay. So in your heart, as you're chanting, as you're listening, just have a sense of this yearning within to return and to awaken and to discover our innate wholeness and perfection. And perfection is an interesting word, but in this sense, it just means a return to being exactly what we are, nothing else being needed. Sanje Chedang Sochi Chonam La Changche Padu Dani Chapsuchi Daki Jinso Jipe Sonam Chi Drola Panchir Sanjay Drupar Sho. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we go for refuge until enlightened. By the power of generosity and the other perfections, may we realize Buddhahood for the benefit of all. All right. Thank you, everybody. And now let's just take a moment to find your body. We're going to start into our meditation practice. So take a moment just to find your body. And a good way to do that is to begin with some deep belly breaths. So breathing in a long, deep inhale down into the belly and feeling the belly expand. And then exhaling, long, slow, complete exhale And as you exhale, feeling the body settle and relax into its own place. So now again, breathing in a long, deep inhale and exhaling, feeling the muscles, the tendons, the joints, everything releasing and relaxing down into its own place. And one more long, deep inhale. And again, releasing, relaxing, settling down into your own body, your source of refuge, the sacred space of your own being. You want to have your spine upright but relaxed, just keeping the natural curvature of the spine. And then for this practice, we usually keep the eyes open, but very gently open. You could just have them open a tiny amount so you're letting in a little bit of color and light. And keeping the gaze very soft, unfocused. You can take your glasses off if you wear them. Your eyes are really here just an opportunity for you to sense into the fullness of the world around you, but not to gaze at any particular thing or to stare at or concentrate on anything in particular. So they're just a way of keeping you in the interconnectedness of your environment. So let's take a moment just to feel into that posture and feel into that sense of being present. Just notice what you notice, whatever's present for you in the body, in your heart, in your mind, in your environment. Just a bare, gentle noticing of what's present for you at this moment. There's no need to focus in this moment on anything at all in particular. You're just open to the panorama of your experience, noticing whatever you notice without getting stuck there. Now allowing your attention to drop down through the body, to come to rest with whatever sensation you notice at the base of the body, where your body meets the cushion or the chair. Really let yourself sink into whatever sensations you notice there. It could be just a sensation of pressure or warmth or tingling. Doesn't really matter. But just letting your attention really begin to merge into that sensation. See how much you can become one with that sensation. And if thoughts arise and begin to sweep you away into other feelings or thoughts or things, let that sensation draw you back into immersion with it, like a magnet, something that pulls you right back into presence. The more you relax into this sensation at the base of the body, the more present you stay in the moment. Now allow your attention, your awareness to expand so that you become aware of the movement of your breath, the feeling of the breath, the sensation of the breath as it comes into the body and as it flows out of the body. So becoming aware of the feeling of the body breathing, the flow of the breath into and out of the body. Let your attention begin to merge with the feeling of the body breathing. Connecting with that energy of life itself, that breath. The more you can relax with the feeling of the body breathing, the more the breath begins to meditate you. So see how much you can really relax into the feeling of the body breathing, where you don't have to do anything at all because the body already knows how to breathe without any help from you. Whenever you become distracted or swept away by thoughts, again, allow the feeling of the body breathing, the feeling of the breath flowing in and out through all the cells of your body. Let that feeling, that sensation, draw you back into union with it like a magnet. Now we are going to return to where we started. So opening up your awareness through all of your senses, your ability to hear, to smell, to taste, to see, to feel, and also to notice the internal movements of your being, your thoughts, feelings, sensations inside the body. Opening up your awareness so that you are holding the fullness, the completeness of your entire experience, and no longer focusing in on one point, like the breath or like a sensation, but simply holding the entirety of your experience moment after moment, allowing whatever arises, a sound, a feeling, a thought, a movement in the visual field, just allowing these movements of energy to arise and dissolve in their own time. And you're simply present in the middle of the display of your own experience, your own being, relaxing into that presence as much as you can. Just noticing. Nothing to do. A gentle witness on the flow of your own being. Notice whatever is arising without fixation. So if you get caught into a loop of thinking, as soon as you notice, just dropping back out into the fullness of your experience, you're feeling, hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, thinking, and feeling all at the same time. Can you stay present in the fullness of that flow of being? Okay, thank you for joining me for the that practice. And we're going to take a little break. So it's 10:45, and we'll come back at 11 o'clock. Okay, so get some tea, coffee, whatever you need, and we'll see you very shortly. All right, welcome back, everyone. I see people returning into their spots, their little squares. So you probably saw the title that I gave to today's discussion. Oh, and before I start, actually, what I wanted to invite everybody, I want to try an experiment this morning. You know, usually the way we do this is whoever's sharing something will talk for, I don't know, 40 minutes or something, and then we open it up for Q&A. But I thought I would invite you to raise questions or comments along the way if something arises for you, and that we can sort of have a more conversational style, possibly, if that ends up unfolding in that way. So if you have a question, you have a comment that comes up while I'm speaking, if you raise your virtual hand, I'll see it, and then I'll just call on you, and we can kind of do a more sort of interactive process. I'd like to try that. So feel welcome to come in to the conversation. So I titled this today's session. What did I title it again? What the river knows, but it has uh, a larger context, which is that I'm going to be exploring over the next four uh, Dharma Sundays something I'm just calling forest teachings. And let me just say a little bit about that to start with. Um, in general, we understand this word Dharma to refer to the teachings of the Buddha, right? The Buddha Dharma is another way of talking about that. And or maybe I should say, but from my perspective, there's also, what the Buddha is teaching is coming out of a larger expanse of truth that we might just call Dharma with a capital D. Actually, the word Dharma is a Sanskrit word for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and all it really means is truth. It just means the truth of how things are. And it's the same thing that the Buddha taught, the same truth that the Buddha taught. But when we are learning to listen to a larger source that can awaken these deep memories of who we are that lie beyond our thinking mind, then these kinds of truths that are present in our experience all the time are helping us to return again and again to our own wholeness, our own essence, the truth of who we really are. And I think a lot of you are familiar with my current thread of inquiry these days, which is this question of who are we really? And why are we here? Why are we here right now? And how do we remember who we really are and why we're here? There's something about that kind of phrasing for me that has been stimulating in pushing me to explore wider contexts of truth than the way that these are expressed through the Buddha Dharma, even though I love the Buddha Dharma, obviously. So, who are we really? How can we really remember that? How do we return to our source, the source of our being, our intertwined nature with everything that is? And, obviously one path of such awakening is the Buddhist path. And when the Buddha fully awakened, it's said that he knew with a knowledge that just vastly exceeds, goes beyond what we can know through our thinking mind. He knew who he was, and he knew what he was, and he knew how he was meant to be in the world. That, sometimes it's described that he directly experienced that he was everything and that everything was him. And that in place of this kind of separate ego tension, which is like this tension in us, this notion of the self, it's not like, the word ego is so fraught and challenging to work with. But I know from my own experience, and you probably do too, that when you sit with yourself, you can experience that sense of self as a kind of tension, a kind of concentration of being, and that's a very dominant sort of sensation for us, a very dominant kind of feeling. And sometimes we experience that kind of contracted tension of energy that we think of as the self actually loosens a bit, right? It actually relaxes a bit. And in those moments, we can feel a very different capacity for being in the world. We can experience a lot more sense of ease and peace and a very profound sense of connectedness that when we're really bound up in the contraction of the self, it's harder to feel that. It becomes very isolated and isolating to narrow in on such a close focus of meanness. But the Buddha, I think, in his awakening, he directly experiencing that somehow that if that tension of the self held in such a way could release, and that he recognized himself as completely interconnected and intertwined with everything, the whole notion of interdependence, which was one of the primary realizations of his awakening, was that he saw the complexity and the intertwined nature of everything, that he was everything and everything was him, and that he wasn't separate in any way, and that in place of this separate ego tension was this vast field of interconnectedness. And from that kind of remembering, from that return to wholeness, then he brought forth the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, which are there to, of course, help others also remember who they really are. So when we think of the word Dharma, we often think of these teachings of the Buddha that are there to open a way for us to return to the recognition of who we really are. But again, this notion of the word, this term Dharma, it means truth. And it means simply the truth of how things actually are. So it's not a different truth from what the Buddha realized, but it's a truth that needs, that is present without language, without concepts, that we can learn to interact with without having to go through the thinking mind. This is how I think of it anyway. And so that in a certain sense, and this is coming very close to the way that the Dharma is expressed through the Dzogchen teachings, that there's a very direct path to our wholeness that circumvents the need to rely on an intellectual understanding in order to be actualized, which is the Dharma of simply the truth of how things actually are. And people around this planet have been studying and exploring. Studying is not really the word, I guess I would say, although that it is a study. and it is an exploration, and it is an investigation. But they've been in relationship, shall we say, with this larger Dharma for centuries, for thousands of years, finding their own way to awakening and insight into who we really are through other sorts of methods, other formulations of a path than the Buddhist path. I mean, that's a pretty obvious thing to say, actually. But even in the Buddhist path, if you remember the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, right? In the morning after as the night of his awakening was coming to a close. Okay, hang on a second here. I gotta blow my nose. Okay. As the night in which he was coming, he was moving toward further and further towards full awakening, was coming to a close. At the very last instant before his full awakening, the Buddha is challenged by Mara, who basically comes to him and says, you say you're fully awakened, but who is it who could witness that awakening? Who's there just to confirm that you actually have fully awakened? And in answer, the Buddha reaches down his right hand to the earth and he touches the earth. And at that moment, he asks the earth to bear witness to his awakening, to his return to this immersion into the energy of life that is so profound that his individual sense of self can understand its true condition. Right? That there's this moment of just acknowledgement. And as his fingers touch the earth, then the earth trembles, right? It trembles in response. And in some versions of the story, not only does the earth shake, but flowers fall from the sky out of nowhere. And so everywhere the earth is singing with the recognition of the Buddha's return to wholeness. And Mara, which is this part of us that is always trying to stay separate, is completely defeated and disappears. It's such an amazing story, actually. And that part of it is so beautiful. And so for a long time, that earth-touching mudra and its significance has been explored by practitioners all over the world, like what's being said here. And if you go and you look it up, you can find all kinds of stories about the meaning of it. Why did this happen? And for me, I have just felt that, okay, this is not just a pretty story, but it's actually a very profound teaching that in many ways has shaped my own path. Because that, in that one gesture that the Buddha made, he wasn't pointing to one of his human teachers, of which he had many. He studied with many, many of the greatest spiritual teachers of his time. And he wasn't pointing to a book of discourses or teachings. And he wasn't listening to a podcast, But he was pointing to the living, energetic presence of the natural world. He was pointing to this return to a simplicity that this planet is always inviting us to inhabit, right? A deep tranquility of spirit and soul that simply knows itself as everything else on the level of its energetic connection. And so, while I have been a very serious student of the Buddha Dharma for most of my life, since I was about 20, the Dharma of the natural world actually was my first and earliest and most consistent teacher. And maybe that's true for some of you as well. But when I was young, in my, as a child and in my teen years, the wilderness, the natural world was my playground. And in that I was very fortunate. I could just go out the door and the natural world was there and present and available to my imagination. And as I grew older, I became a backpacker, and I would go for long periods of time into the wilderness by myself. Um, I once did a 4-month solo backpacking trip through the southwest of the United States, through the Canyonlands. And I couldn't carry a tent because it's too heavy. So I just brought my sleeping bag and a fly sheet, and I would just wrap myself up like a caterpillar in a cocoon at night. And I mean, I would go for months without seeing anybody or talking to anybody, but just being in the presence of the energies of the natural world, which initially was extremely challenging because my mind was just rampant, like blah, 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 so much internal chatter distracting me from being present in any kind of full way. But, if you don't have anyone to chatter back at you, slowly that kind of busyness of mind begins to calm. And whenever, I'm sure if you've done a retreat, a meditation retreat, because you also have a tool to help with that quieting of the busyness of the mind, which is your meditation. But that as the days pass, the busyness of the mind begins to calm. So I found that also in the wilderness, even though at that time I wasn't a practitioner, that slowly my mind began to calm down. And then there would be periods where there was no thought, and I was simply present in this very simple, very gentle, very open way with everything that was unfolding. So that way of learning from the wilderness has always been key to my life. And I found a magic in the natural world that modern life doesn't seem to include, or the life of the city, this life of civilization, this life of not even city life, but just simply the life of the mind, the being immersed in the thought bubble, all of the different trajectories of education and ways that we are influenced by the cultural patterns and discourses of our times. They didn't ever included the thing I wanted the most, which was this kind of magic. I kept wondering where the magic was. But I found that in the natural world, and I found a kind of peace that our rapid pace of living doesn't allow us to access very easily. And I also found a kind of deep cellular relaxation that I couldn't access either when I was constantly busy with one thing and another. Which is not to say, and again, I'm sharing all of this because I'm kind of leading up to what I want to focus on most. But more I'm wanting to suggest that not that we disengage from everything that our modern life includes, but that we contemplate the possibility that there is another arena of awakening and connecting and returning to who we really are that is available, always available, actually, even if it's only available through your plant in your house, right? But we have what the natural world presents to us as a fundamental teaching is always available if we become willing to tune in to that teaching through developing this modality of knowing, experiencing the energies of the natural world through our being. So it's not a thinking process. It's not a way of gathering knowledge and awakening through thinking and contemplating and in the ways that all of the usual ways that we've been trained to uh, gather knowledge, but a tuning into this other aspect of our being, the embodied, energetic interface of our being that no one, for at least in my life, I was never pointed in that direction as a access point for awakening. And yet, at this point, I really feel it is one of the key access points that we are invited to strengthen at this moment in time, with where our planet stands, with what's happening in our world. This other way of knowing that we all have feels like a possible antidote to some of the destruction, the aggression, the confusion, the mess, to try to encapsulate it all in one word, that we find ourselves in. It's going to take getting outside the box that we have been inhabiting for centuries if we want to shift the balance of this situation and find wholeness and healing. So that, and actually that's been one of my biggest inspirations in the work that I've been doing recently is, I mean, I feel like I could sit up here and talk about the Dharma until I'm blue in the face. I mean, I spent how many years studying and then in graduate school, and there's nothing wrong with any of that, except it's still within a dominant modality that continues to strengthen models of presence in the world that we have, that are consumerist, materialist, that are still immersed in a patriarchal model. And we see where that's gotten us. And we need a different modality. And so I'm really interested in going as deep in my own personal experience of this other way of knowing as I can in order to cultivate communities where we can all be doing this together, which will shift, I believe, the foundations of our way of being in the world and with each other. And so basically, I have been looking, seeking to learn as deeply from the natural world as I can. And I've spent more time in the wilderness than I have in urban areas in the course of my life. And that was simply by kind of an internal preference. But I've always had this sense that there must be a way to penetrate even deeper into the wholeness that is present in the natural world and to really hear the teachings of the natural world. What does that really mean to hear those teachings? So for the last few years, I think some of you know that I have been working a lot with some South American indigenous traditions of plant medicine. And I have found in those traditions this incredible symmetry and synergy between the truth as the Buddha has taught it and the truths that come through these traditions, that they're really the same thing and just a different languaging ultimately to express them. So I just returned yesterday from a month down in southern Colombia in the jungle. That part of Colombia is known as the Putumayo region, and it's considered to be the origin of the Amazon. It's from there the Amazon River flows down into Ecuador and down into Peru, and and the full Amazon basin unfolds. But this area is rainforest. And so I spent a month down there in a tent by the side of a river in the jungle, um, with no electricity and no hot water and not a single sound of any mechanized object. No cars, no airplanes, no nothing electronic. And the modalities of healing that are taught in this indigenous culture that I've become connected to, they're between 5,000 and 7,000 years old. And they are working with the plants, the different plants in the Amazon, to help to return beings from their state of fragmentation back to wholeness, to break this enchantment of the modern world so thoroughly that what can sing again through our veins are these ancestral memories of who we really are and why we're here. And from the perspective of that culture, we all possess this wealth of these ancestral memories of the truth of who we really are and why we're here. And it's the practices that we engage in our lives that helps to awaken those memories, to return us back to our origin. And it's not, I want to make clear that I'm not talking about a turning away from our modern lives in the sense of, oh, we know we all have to go live in the forest and give up all of our comforts and our habit patterns. But what I'm talking about is the cultivation of a way of being that recognizes the more that we are beyond those supports, shall we say, for living well. And that recognizes too that those supports for living well can be misused and can blind us and prevent us from accessing a simplicity that is being reflected or mirrored back to us from our planet at every moment. It's hard to see it when we're constantly got our face in our phones or on our computers, or this culture of distraction and materialist focus that we are in makes it challenging to see past the thought bubble. But we have to start seeing past that thought bubble. That's such a tiny part of who and what we are. And we need to access the more that we are and the fullness of our being and our interconnectedness with everything. So this particular session, I wanted to give that introduction. And then I wanted to just say a little bit about, what I titled this, What the River Knows. So when I was down in the jungle, my tent was set, I had my tent set up, maybe 10 feet from the river that ran through that particular area. And it's a rainforest, and even though the rainy season was supposed to be finishing at the end of July, nobody told the weather that. And I think it rained every single day that I was there. Oh, and I see a hand. All right, Joanna, yes, please unmute yourself.
Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
And really great to see you, Liz. I'm listening to your talk and I'm thinking about all the wonderful experiences you and I and other people have had in beautiful, pristine wilderness. And I found in my own path that going to places where harm was being inflicted on that land, on that earth, really changed my framework. And I just wanted to put that in the group. Like, all the time I've spent out in beautiful, I grew up in California, and like Big Sur is my calling card, and the Sierra Nevada, that's what gets me in touch with what we've been talking about this morning. But going to places where humans are intentionally destroying that is what really has moved me to act, I guess, rather than just be in it. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you, Joanna. Yes, I mean, that can be very powerful motivator for protecting and preserving these natural spaces. And again, I should say right now, I'm not talking about not acting. I'm not advocating that we stop in any way showing up for saving our planet in all the ways that we can. But what I am advocating is an inner experience of transformation that can form a base from which we can act more effectively and with more care and love and understanding of what we're doing when we act than if we don't have that level of development in our being. If we're acting only out of rage or anger or despair or depression or grief over the loss that we can see taking place, I mean, we're still acting, but are we perpetrating or continuing some of those same dynamics that have caused us to be in this position to begin with? So what I'm interested in is at the moment, how do we cultivate an inner level of awakening and returning to the truth of who we are that can then be a source of energy, an unending, really, source of energy for transformative action in the world. And one of those things that can spur us then to transformative action being exactly what you described, Joanna, to immerse ourselves in places that the destruction of our natural world, our environments, and our biodiversity is unfolding. So, so I'll go back to what I was saying, which is just that I, had sent my tent up right next to the river. Oh, that's where they put me anyway. And the rivers that flow through these areas are really the lifeblood of the cultures who live there. Everything depends on the rivers and on the cleanliness of the rivers and on their flow. No, you can't survive without access to the water. And so the whole time I was there, I felt that I was immersed in the sounds, the sensations, the energy of that river, which was literally 10 feet from my head at night when I would go to sleep. And because it was still raining so much, when it rains down there, it's not, it's like a waterfall pouring out of the sky. There's so much water that comes down. Everything is soaked and it's mud everywhere. And the river rises, and it rises fast. And the only way to get to the place where we were was to cross the river. So once we were across the river and there, it was catch as catch can whether we would actually be able to get back out again, which didn't really matter for a while, but towards the end was a little bit concerning when over the last 4 days it rained hard for 3 of them and I barely got out. But for me, that river became a living presence. And every night when I would lie down to go to sleep, it was not just the sound of the river, but it was the energy of the river that I felt embraced in this energetic space in which that, because it's a fairly large river, that sound, that energy was pouring through my being on a continuous level. There was no getting away from it. There was nowhere to go where I couldn't hear it, or where it wasn't a presence somehow. And so what started arising for me was this sense of, what was I being shown in the mirror of that energy? What was being communicated through that continuous, ongoing flow. And one thing simply is this notion of flow and this notion of the energetic continuity of our being with everything that is, that when we can relax enough into our bodies, into the and feeling the energy of the body, which is, the prana of the body, the flow of blood and breath and of lymph and all the ways in which there is movement that is occurring in and through the body, which is not just on the level of substances like lymph or blood, but is on the level of energy. When we start to connect with the energy of this body, which is, taught about very regularly in the Tibetan yogic tradition, right? That there is actually a level of our embodiment that is much more subtle than the physical, and that is considered the energy body, the body of our energy. And that body is simultaneous with our physical body. It's not separate from our physical body at all, but permeates and infuses the physical body with sensation, with energy. And it's said that if your awareness is developed enough, you can actually feel sensation on every single part of your body at every moment. So if I were to say to you, yeah, feel the sensations in your elbow, you could immediately feel the energy of your elbow, what's going on there, this array of sensations that are taking place in that part of the body. But that's happening continuously. And so this energy body is in a constant state of flow. It's always being influenced by one or another situation. It's influenced by a sound. It's influenced by whatever we eat. It's influenced by whether we're hot or cold. There's this constant ongoing flow of being that is happening as part of our general makeup. And the river was a reminder to me of that lack of solidity, that we are not a noun, that we are a verb. We are this malleable, fluid situation that is continuously unfolding itself into new horizons, right? We're not fixed in any one condition or situation. So that was one thing that Judith, yes. Hello.
Good morning, Lama Liz. So good
Good
to see you.
morning.
I wanted to share because you're talking about the flow and how our basic sense of self is one of contraction. Well, during the meditation, especially on letting breath breathe you, it flashed in my mind this phrase, holding on for dear life, and how I realized that that's been that's been much of my life. And the thought, oh, let go for dear life. And
Oh, yeah.
and that's what I would go, oh yes, let go and be able to flow. So thank you.
That's beautiful, Judith. I love that. Yeah. Let go for dear life. That's actually a perfect description of the practice. And, it sounds so wonderful, and it's not that easy, right? It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, to just let go and find ourselves in the flow, because some part of us continues to want to solidify and to lock down and to hold on. And that's a whole investigative path in and of itself. And in fact, when I was down in the jungle, I had this experience over the first couple of days, because all of my familiar landmarks were stripped away. And I could feel this part of me that wanted to, that was like kind of freaking out. Like, what is there to hold on to here? There's nothing to hold on to. And this sort of primal fear behind that attachment to my daily rituals and my usual things, that not having them there was kind of exposed to me. And I had this sense in that it was a couple of different nights where I lay awake with that energy, just of this feeling of I've become so dependent on certain ways of being in relationship to my reality that when they're not there, something else inside is, initially at least, um, very unstable and frightened of what of just probably what it really came to me. What is it? What am I actually afraid of here? But afraid of the freedom that is beyond those structures, and because it's an unknown, and because who I am in that wouldn't have any reference points that are familiar, and yet the invitation was so much there to, I mean, and really the choicelessness of it at that moment was there to step into that. Logan, hi.
There it is. Hi, Lama Liz. It's so nice to see you all. I don't usually here on Sundays because of other family obligations, but I'm happy to be here today. This just brings up so much amazing stuff for me. And just listening to Judith and you talking about that letting go, I realized when I was young, again, before I ever started formally studying Dharma, I would go to trees for refuge. And it was interesting because I would climb trees and get up near the top with the birds. Um, if I was stressed at all, I would go up there. And you've heard me talk about this a little bit before, but the sensation for me, the feeling was that up there I was being held. I could totally let go and was being held. And I often get that near water of any kind or trees. It's all pretty connected for me, but that, so it's kind of built in this, for me, this letting go. Um, and some of the things that I'm curious about, well, one is how to do that right here in the middle of town, but I have found that stepping outside in the middle of the night, if I wake up in the middle of the street, in the middle of the town, it's like, whoa, I'm there. I'm being held by this vastness that's so amazing. Also, just in the mornings lately, since it's cooled off, I've been taking the early morning meditation walks. And again, um, what I'm curious about is, and working with, is how I remember that each one of us is a part of that flow and a part of that, and that people are also part of what's holding me and part of nature. Because that's where, with what's happening in the world, somehow I label it onto people, it's bad or something. So I've been experimenting more and more with that, and understanding how I'm this body of energy and literally made up mostly of water and flow. If I can, when I'm on my walks, looking at people, or in the store, looking at people and seeing that just natural flow in them also. Um, because I don't have time to run off to these beautiful places where, some of us can go some of the time. Anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Like, okay, there's nature, and yes, that's where I go for refuge, but how can we be in touch with that within our beautiful people?
Our communities,
Yes.
absolutely. No, you are anticipating where I was headed. So I'm really grateful that you're bringing that up, because obviously that's part of this path, right? Is if we can, and I don't, maybe we don't have to start with this, but for me, it's been kind of helpful to start with just the recognition of my own interconnectedness and energetic uh, capacity to be in connection with others. And then to, from there, begin to be able to recognize that that is a truth that is there for all beings, and that all beings are not necessarily aware. In fact, many are not. And but the more our attention and awareness becomes refined in the knowledge that even a thought that we have has ripples that are extending out into time and space, that they're having an effect, that what we bring into the world and into our communities matters a great deal. How we are, what we say, what our actions are. But really coming back to most fundamentally, how are we when we go into the places that we go? How are we in the line at the grocery store with other people around us? And how are we in, a movie theater? How are we when we sit down with our friends or when we have to meet a stranger? What are the qualities that we are reflecting in those moments? And if they are qualities that we've cultivated awareness of within ourselves, then we don't have to do much more than show up as we actually are. And that is a communication that can be transformative, or at least raise curiosity in others who might start to want to know, like how can I cultivate what I'm seeing in this other person or feeling from this other person? I think all of this journey of whatever awakening we want to call it, return to wholeness, discovering who we really are, there's some part of it that is deeply personal. And yet at the same time, it is an overall evolutionary, an overall evolution, maybe is a better way to say it, of the whole human race, that we're raising the frequency and the energy of the whole human race by our own actions. And then that allows us to be present in the field of other beings with more compassion and more love and more openness to what the possibilities might be for transformation, for shifting some of these paradigms that have caused so much destruction and so much grief. How are we really going to make a difference in this life? Why are we really here? Again, these are really key questions for me. It's not just, yes, I have had this incredible opportunity to go and immerse myself in the natural world in this particular way. But it's, from my perspective, absolutely in the service of what can be returned into the situation where we all are. Because that is the place where any wisdom, any compassion, any love, any transformative power that we can access within ourselves is needed, right? It's not just about going away and living in a cave for the rest of our lives, much as that sounds lovely on some level. Amanda, yeah.
So as you're talking, the words that are standing out to me, you keep using the words love and compassion. And actually, last night, I just got home from 10 days in a cabin in the woods at a retreat that was focused on the Brahma Viharas.
Ooh.
So love, compassion, joy, and equanimity.
Right.
And it just seems like maybe that's the answer. That's what we cultivate and bring into the space and just radiate out. And, if everybody just did that, just, cultivate those feelings and just walk around radiating them to the beings around them, like, wouldn't that just fix everything?
It probably would. But I wonder if, what comes to me when you're speaking is this, we already are those energies. That's what we're fundamentally composed of. Our essence is the essence of love, of compassion, of joy, of equanimity. And so when we practice those, we strengthen them and we bring them forward more palpably and energetically within our being. But that's who we really are. And so the more we can embody that in the world, it's true, there's some kind of ripple effect that's happening. And we tend to think we live in this isolated shell, but that's so not true. That who we are can make a difference in the world. Barbara.
Sorry, the print is so small I can't read it anymore. So I definitely have experience with how the energy of loving kindness and compassion and wisdom radiates out, and affects our environment. I also have experience. The experience is based in when I'm in the wilderness, in the sort of unadulterated natural world, of there being a response from the wilderness to me, giving me direct understanding of a question in my mind. And I don't know if this is just my intellectual cognitive side, but I keep seeking for a way that, particularly as a group, I believe that we can find answers in that experience, that come from the field, the essential nature that underlies everything. So I wonder if you're thinking about community, a group has looked at that issue.
Well, I agree with you 100%. And that's exactly what I'm hoping to begin to foster in our communities, is these larger group experiences of interconnection with the bigger field, and what comes through, which could come through in a variety of ways, right? It will have to come through in forms that use concepts and words, or forms, or movements, or colors, or whatever. It could be any kind of form that that this information might come through. But can we first of all just hear what we're being taught, and then find the way to bring it through in our own unique, particular way that we each are going to have differently. Chris.
Hi. I'm so grateful for all of this and for being here with all of you. One of the things that keeps coming through for me lately is the need to be in wholeness with the fullness of my experience, which includes a larger range of emotions than just love and joy. And to just acknowledge the need for us to be with each other in the times that feel painful, and in the grief, and in the processing of difficult emotions, may they be from the past or from the present. I mean, there's the situation on our planet. It gives us lots of reasons to feel ways other than joy and gladness, and there's a corresponding, I think, I feel very deeply a corresponding capacity to feel the joy and the love that goes with our willingness to feel into the difficulties, the trauma, the sorrow, the grief that we experience, that's often held in our bodies, and that being present with other people and speaking our truth. If my truth in the moment is I'm re-experiencing the death of my mother, and I feel incredible grief and sorrow about it, there's something very valuable for that, not just for me, but for the group. Witnessing each other in our fullness is something that builds our capacity to feel our own experience, and that allows us then to feel into the broader experience of other people and of the natural world as well. There's something about our culture that teaches us, we have a very happiness biased culture that says you should be happy, like get over, oh, your mother died 30 years ago, well, get over it, like, you know, how come you're not happy? I think our willingness to feel deeply what we feel, the full range of what we feel, then allows us to be more permeable to the fullness, and to feel the joy and the love and what holds us in the natural world. So I just wanted to sort of bring that in, and it came up for me, and I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I believe that it's the fullness of our whole spectrum of emotional life, because that's energy. The whole spectrum of our emotional life is the energetic field that we inhabit. And if we don't feel the full dimension of that, then some part of us is never acknowledged and never brought into the whole. So yeah, I mean, certainly not just saying there's only at the core. I mean, at the core, actually, there really is just this love. But that love is there to embrace the fullness of all the rest of our expressions. So I 100% agree with everything you just said. That was so beautifully put. Thank you. Mary.
This has been really, really helpful for me to hear you sort of put this next to that, and then it's A follows B, but also the expansiveness. And I had my hand up, then I took it down because I thought I can't really figure out how to ask this or say this, but then I put it back up. So I have been, for the past couple of years, exploring the idea of entanglement through my landscape photographs, through my art, of realizing that for some reason I was drawn to photographing these tangled, twisted woods and weeds and vines, and wondering what that was about, which then led me to start reading all this stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily read, like James Bridle on ways of being, and books about plant intelligence. And now, you know, I'm halfway through like 4 books, you know, about is the river alive, all these things, which what part of it, part of it is that it's what everyone is saying, and of course we know this is true, it's our sense of separation and thinking that we are a solid self that keeps us from what you just said, listening to what we're being taught. But at the same time, I feel like I need more tools.
Right.
You know, like and the places that I'm taking photographs are literally in the middle of an urban park, 5 blocks from, less than 5 blocks from my house. You know, I'm not in the wilderness particularly, but I feel this and have felt for a while, even before it got into this entanglement idea, that I need more tools for how to listen beyond my sort of, somewhat well processed but still solid self, um, and um, and somehow being able to embody that. So I think my question as I'm getting along here is, what are some tools? And I'm wondering, is some of it more embodiment work and understanding? But anyway, I think my question is, what are some tools to
Yeah.
help one more fully listen to what the natural world is teaching us?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the question. And I really, because we're at noon, what I want to say right now in response to that, Mary, is just that I would love to see an ongoing group exploration of this question for all of us, because I think that there's a lot of wisdom in this group. And we have 3 more Dharma Sundays, if you're able to come, where we could continue to explore this question together. And it's part of why I even went down to Colombia, was I'm looking for tools to bring back and to share and to help all of us cultivate this capacity to listen beyond the fixed self and the intellectualized self. And I'll just end with a possible access point, at least one that is working, that I am finding powerful, which is this cultivating the capacity to sense through the body, through the sensational field, into the space around. That the more and by that I mean sitting, closing your eyes, or even leaving them open if you want to, but beginning to feel out from here. Not from here, but from the body, feeling into this multidimensional space in which we are immersed. Because actually we are always involved in fields of energy, constantly. So there's a constant energetic flow. Energy can be felt more and more the more we inhabit fully the sensory body, the sensational body. To feel sensation in the body is a tremendous gateway for beginning to sense out into these energetic fields. So that's, and there are many ways to even go about talking about that, which we can get into, I think, later. We don't have time right now, but I want to put that out there as a beautiful question to end this session with, which is just, let's create a communal field together in which we explore that question and see what comes to you. Because I think, see what comes to you and try not to think your way to an answer. Because I think that what might come to us is going to be more potent than what we could think up. Okay, what do you guys think? And I'll hopefully then look forward to having you be coming back to the next sessions that will continue this same theme together.
Thank you very much. Great, really great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And now let's just, I think we'll end with the dedication of merit, which is again a way to send this energy of inquiry, of communion, of creative co-creation together out into the world. And so Amanda, if you can put up the slide for that when you have a chance, we'll do that. And really, again, when you do these little practices, just try to feel them and not just think them. What does it feel like to send out benefit into the world? Oh, can we have the other one? The bodhicitta dedication? Actually, maybe we should do the eco-sattva one. That's the vow. All right, let's do that. That's more than one page, right? Oh, there it went. What do you guys think? Should we take this eco-sattva vow? Because I think it's very much in harmony with what we've been talking about. And we'll use that as our dedication. Let's do that. Sorry, Amanda. Okay. So the way to do this is to do this together. And so we can all just recite it together. And I think it's another page after this too. So Gaia is in peril. I vow to protect her. Climate change is relentless. I vow to end it. Gaia's teachings are infinite. I vow to hear them. Awakened love is inconceivable. I vow to embody it. Oops.
Yeah, the second part doesn't seem to be in the slideshow. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, you know what? I think what we said is perfectly appropriate and beautiful. So we'll end with that, except that I see that Sheila also raised her hand. Sheila, do you want to say something quickly?
No, that was an accident.
Oh,
Sorry. Except to say thank you so much and great love to everyone on the screen.
thank you, dear. And love to everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you for coming today. And I look forward to seeing you when we continue our conversation in more depth next time.